In January of 1975, David Bowie recorded the song Fame. Fame would be released on the Young Americans album later that same year in July. Fame was a songwriting collaboration between the Thin White Duke himself, guitarist Carlos Alomar, and Beatle John Lennon. Carlos Alomar was responsible for creating and developing the funky, spacey guitar lick, with John Lennon and David Bowie creating both the melody and the lyrics, which expressed both artists' frustration and their dissatisfaction with fame and stardom. Fame would chart all the way up to #1 in the United States and would later become arguably one of David Bowie's most iconic hit singles. Later that year, in December of 1975, however, James Brown would release the single Hot, I Need to Be Loved, 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 Loved. That is actually the song's full title, but for the remainder of this video, and for the sake of brevity, I will refer to the song as Hot moving forward. Hot would first be released as a single, and then later appear on the lead track to his 1976 album of the same name. When guitarist Carlos Alomar first heard Hot by James Brown, he was livid. Why? Well, let's listen to a little bit of that track.
This morning I woke up all in heat. Couldn't find no dry spot from my head down to my feet. Got gasping and coughing till my body begins.
Sound familiar? Interestingly enough, both songs have completely different openings before they break into the exact same guitar riff. You know, oftentimes when I do these song comparisons, I will sit at the piano or with a guitar to examine their different constructions. But this time, there's no need. It's obvious. This is one of the most blatant examples of theft, musical theft, that I've ever heard. Now, in the present day, we would think, oh, James Brown must have sampled the Bowie song Fame. But in the mid-1970s, digital sampling as we understand it did not exist. The closest technological technique that could have been used back then would have been to create a tape loop of the original recording. This was a technique that the Beatles used in Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. But when the Beatles recorded Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, they just used random tape loops of calliopes playing to create a kind of sonic background. When I listen to Hot by James Brown, however, I think to myself, well, he did one of two things. Either he went to his backing band and said, play Fame by David Bowie, or he actually took the actual recording, the record of Fame, and simply dubbed off a copy of the instrumental section. This wouldn't be hard to do because there is a long instrumental section at the beginning of the song after the intro where it's just the guitar riff before a single vocal line is uttered. In fact, when I listen to Hot and I compare the instrumental track to the vocal track, the instrumental track, which is the guitar track, it has this very second generation quality, as if it has been dubbed down from some other recording source, whereas the vocals have a much higher quality, a first generation quality. And in the credits for this song, there are no musicians listed. And getting back to my original remark regarding sampling, when you do sample someone else's song and make it part of your recording, you, one, have to get permission from the original artist. Two, you must include the original songwriters of whoever you sampled in your credits as co-songwriters. And three, you must pay them a share of royalties. In the credits for Hot, James Brown is listed as the sole songwriter. He gives no credit to Bowie, Lennon, or Alomar. Oftentimes, in cases of alleged musical fraud or plagiarism or copying, there is always some room to give someone the benefit of the doubt, that maybe it was just a musical coincidence, or maybe it was a case of subconscious plagiarism. But in this case, I feel there is almost no room to think that maybe it was subconscious or that it was just a coincidence. Fame was just too big of a hit single that year. There is no way that the Godfather of Soul could not have heard it. But the question that I wonder about is, why did he steal it? Did he think that no one would notice? Oftentimes throughout his career, James Brown has expressed the feeling that other musical artists stole from him. And so perhaps he just thought he was justified stealing from someone else. And to a certain extent, that's fine. Nothing does get created in a vacuum. Musical artists borrow from each other all the time. But the difference is they find ways to mask it. I have to wonder, why didn't James Brown just grab the basic groove to Fame and then change some of the signature riffs and transform it into something else completely? I mean, it wouldn't have been that hard. The vocal melodies are, after all, completely different from each other. Now, according to the book, Strange Fascination by David Buckley, David Bowie did find out about Hot. And while he recognized it as a blatant swipe, he still felt flattered that James Brown would lift from him. Guitarist Carlos Alomar, whom I mentioned earlier, and who created the guitar riff, and also knew James Brown, however, felt very differently. He was described as feeling deeply hurt, and he wanted Bowie to sue James Brown. But Bowie insisted on not suing unless Hot became a hit. David Bowie may have felt flattered by James Brown stealing from him, but he wasn't stupid. Hot by James Brown never became a hit, so Bowie did nothing. After all, why bother to sue someone you admire if no one else is going to confuse your song for someone else's? In a 1979 interview, James Brown was confronted on the subject and asked if he had ever heard Bowie's Fame. Brown responded, "I think the man is great. He's very talented. I did a thing of Fame called Hot. It's like Jose Feliciano. He took the arrangement for Light My Fire off I Feel Good. Sly Stone came out with Thank You. That's just Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. Everyday people may be slow, but the rhythm changes in that are mine. I can beat all of them doing that. Parliament, Clinton, all of them. I can beat them to it." By the way, it's worth pointing out that Carlos Alomar did have a brief stint in James Brown's band during the late 1960s. He obviously wasn't there for the recording of Hot. So who knows? Perhaps James Brown not only felt that other artists were stealing his songs, but were also stealing his band members too. Perhaps he felt that Carlos Alomar should have created that riff for him. I do wonder, however, if Brown would have shared the songwriting credit with Carlos Alomar in the same way that David Bowie did. Fun fact, at the 2-minute and 36-second mark, there is a little guitar lick that sounds kind of similar to the lick used in Jungle Boogie by Kool and the Gang, released in 1973. When MC Hammer sampled Super Freak by Rick James for his 1990 hit You Can't Touch This, he got legal permission, he gave songwriting credit to the original songwriters, and shared the royalties with them. Given Bowie's disposition about the whole thing, it seems pretty obvious that James Brown could have picked up the phone, called up David Bowie, and said, "Hey, I'd like to do a thing to your song Fame. Let's work out a deal." Just the nature of that collaboration could have given Brown a whole lot more publicity for Hot, and both artists perhaps could have enjoyed a hit single. And James Brown would have invented the practice of sampling a previous hit in the anticipation of creating a new hit decades before MC Hammer or anyone else. This is TJR, and those are my thoughts. What do you think? Please leave a comment. I'm curious to know. As always, if you like what I'm doing, be sure to click like, click subscribe, and smash that bell notification icon. And if you'd like to show that extra level of support, please consider becoming a patron supporter. Patron supporters receive exclusive advance access to selected videos and behind-the-scenes content available nowhere else. I want to thank everybody so much for watching. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.